And these are what we hope you'll learn from the presentation. We're going to give you an outline of the general types of clinical trials and intended uses that for your assay will describe the corresponding types of data for each assay's intended use, which is what drives the data analysis is the intended use. Provide guidance on the format and content of the clinical trial descriptions in the IVD submissions. And the overall purpose of that is to enable an easy and accurate communication with the FDA reviewers. You lose time if the FDA misinterprets or misunderstands what you've done, so that's a really key point in an efficient communication. And we'll also offer tips along the way to consider not only in the development of the designs and the descriptions, but also in the statistical analysis and the data presentation. So the next topic is an overview of the clinical trial planning. So the first step, you look at what is the intended use. That's the key driver to what your trial is going to look like and the types of data analyses you're going to need to perform. So you look at it and you ask yourself and your team, do we want to go for a screening claim? Do we want to go for a diagnosis, either as a standalone or as an aid in the diagnosis of a condition? Do you want a prognostic claim? Or do you want a treatment selection? So once you decide on the intended use, then you look at what is the intended population. Are you going to look at asymptomatic individuals? Usually screening is associated with asymptomatic individuals. Do you want to look at populations with signs and symptoms, which is what you use in a diagnostic intended use? Treatment decision. As part of this treatment selection, you want to, the population that you would look at would be ones who are going to need a decision on the treatment. And then there are always specific subgroups among those populations that I just listed, and that's part of the fine-tuning of the intended use and the intended population. And then once you have this defined, then you begin to look at what are your trial endpoints. Are you going to correlate to a diagnostic gold standard or to a predicate device? Are you going to look at the risk of developing the disease? What's the likelihood or risk of recurrence of a disease? And prediction for response to treatment. All those are types of endpoints that match the intended uses and the intended populations. Then once we get into that, once we've defined those three criteria for designing your trial, then we have to look at what type of trial are you going to want to have, an interventional trial or an observational trial. An interventional trial is a significant risk trial, and that's a trial in which, so interventional trial, it's used as a significant importance in diagnosing, curing, mitigating, or treating disease or otherwise preventing impairment of human health and presents a potential risk to the health, safety, or welfare of a subject. And that is actually the definition that you'll find in 21 CFR 812.3M. So in other words, if you are using the investigational device as part of the decision process on diagnosis or treatment of the patient or selection of a particular intervention, that's considered significant risk because it is an investigational product with the performance characteristics not established yet. In that situation, it's significant risk and would be considered an interventional study. An observational study is simply everything that is not a significant risk interventional. So it's not used for diagnosing, curing, or mitigating a disease, and it's not used to assign a patient to a specific treatment arm. So you can see that the interventional is using investigational results to actually treat the patient. Observational is not. And because the observational is not, it is not considered a significant risk and does not require things like an investigational device exemption. So you have to take that into account when you're planning your trial design. So the next type is, now that you've got your type, now you're looking at the formats. Is it a prospective trial or a retrospective? Prospective is a trial that uses specimens that have been collected specifically for the trial.